All right, guys. We've got a lot left to cover today, but it's been a great morning so far. Thanks for being here. Continue to eat your lunch. We have an opportunity to sit down and have a fireside chat with Anthony Pompliano, better known as Pomp. If you guys don't listen to his podcast, probably nobody in this room doesn't listen to his podcast. So I don't even need to say where to find it. Pomp, it's been a crazy couple weeks.
Absolutely. I got to say something first. I'm happy to be here in Texas, but I'm very disappointed. I have not seen as many boots and cowboy hats as I was promised. So we're going to have to fix that. But no.
I think we saw Representative Cody Harris back there was in his boots.
Look, the last couple of weeks obviously have been crazy, but to me, what's fascinating is that for a year now, across the American economy in general, it's been pretty crazy. And we've obviously seen the Federal Reserve continue to destroy demand. And when you get toward, a year, 18 months of just down-only markets across all asset classes, and then you get kind of like the gut punch of a large player going down like FTX, I think a lot of people start questioning, do I want to keep doing this? I've literally had founders call me and be like, whatever. But really what that is like, that's the point where we find out, like, why are people here?
Yeah.
And so it's exciting. If you know that you're going to be here in 10 years, now's the time to kind of make your stand.
And you got the builders in the room right here.
Let's go.
I showed Anthony a text backstage from one of my uncles who's been in banking his whole life. And basically he was like, hey, are you sure you want to risk your career being in this industry? Like this whole long text, with concern, your uncle, So very, very, kind text. He's been in banking his whole life. And Anthony and I just kind of grinned at it. It's like, yeah, it doesn't faze us, right? Yeah. We're in it for the long haul.
If you understand this stuff, I think you're very sympathetic to the fact that there's going to be ups and downs. But I do think a lot about, if you go back to 2008, even further back to 2000, most of the most valuable companies in the world today went through, immense price drawdowns, almost going out of business. And so if you look at, just take Bitcoin and the network itself today, Bitcoin is incredibly resilient, right? Like the price is down, yes, but hash rate's hitting all-time highs. We're seeing kind of all these underlying fundamentals continue to strengthen, which is not what happens in like the equity market. Like if you look, why are companies' valuations falling? Yes, the stock is going down because multiples are compressing, but also like sales are down. Yeah. And so naturally with something like Bitcoin, when you see the fundamental strengthening and the price going down, you don't got to be a genius, right? It's like those two things will meet again. The question is just when and where, but it's likely that price will recover before the fundamentals erode.
Right. So we've got a big task ahead of us, a tall hill to climb on the policy front, regaining the public's trust. If you had, in fact, let's say you could sit down with an elected official, a regulator, for an afternoon, a little bit longer period of time. Mm-hmm. What are those key points that you're hitting with that elected official or regulator?
You're not going to have a job if you don't embrace this technology. And that sounds like, look, it's true, right? And the reason why I say it that way is because if you think of the incentives of most elected officials, right, there's two types. There's people who want power and there's people who want to serve the people. We hope there's more of the people trying to serve their citizens than the people who just want power. But regardless of why you're there, this technology is going to continue to become pervasive across American society. And so take the White House numbers. They estimate that about 15% of all Americans have Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. There's other private estimates that are even higher. So you're already talking about a constituents across the country that's in the double digits and increasing at a pretty rapid rate. Then if you start to look at where jobs are being created, where economic value is being created and captured, like this industry is a hotbed, not only for the innovation and all like the finance stuff, but in Texas, you see all the infrastructure being built, you see the companies and the jobs. So I think that that's like a key piece to it. But more importantly is not just like, hey, how does this help me as a politician? I do believe that most politicians, even though they do dumb things sometimes, they say dumb things, whatever, most of them are good people with good intentions. And so they have some loyalty to America, to the ethos of the country, things like that. And if you look at Bitcoin specifically, Bitcoin is literally taking the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and other aspects that make up American society that we as a people have all agreed to adhere ourselves to, and it has written it into software, and it has said we will not fucking change no matter what anybody says or does. And that is an idea that previously just nobody thought was possible, right? And then you take it a step further and you say, okay, well, that's great for things like personal property rights or individual liberties. But what happens when now we also take that and we apply those same exact ideas to monetary policy? And one of the things I've been harping on now for years, and it started out, I used to get calls from all the top hedge fund Wall Street guys. Then it was central bankers. Then it was even regulators, all this stuff. And they'd be like, stop saying this stuff. This sounds crazy. Is that Bitcoin is an automated central bank. And if you're an economist, if you're a central banker, you're like, fuck this guy, right? But ultimately, as a central bank, you have two specific things that you're asked to do. It is to be independent. Do not fly in the whims of political favor. Do not do things that would make us believe that you're corrupt or anything. Be an independent organization. And the second thing is be predictable. Your predictability is the core feature of which American citizens are basing their future on. They are planning their lives based on you having a predictable monetary policy. So when you're not predictable, you're fucking people. And so ultimately what we have asked for is we've asked humans to sit down, to take data, which is inaccurate, but they take data where literally we're sending about 400, 500 people from BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, go into the grocery stores with tablets and they're manually inputting the price of things. It's 2022. What the fuck is going on, right? We have Square, Block, right? We have Affirm. We have all these companies that have hundreds of millions of data points that they get actively every single day in real time. Why are we not using that data? Why are we using people walking into a grocery store? The data's bad. Okay, problem number one. Problem two then is we're going to take all that data and we're going to sit in a room and we're going to synthesize it as humans. Guess what? Humans suck at looking at data. But that's what we do. And then we try to predict the future. We say, if we do this or this to the monetary policy, it's going to change the way that people act. It's going to change the way the economy operates, et cetera. We suck at producing or predicting the future. And so what Bitcoin ultimately does is it says, it doesn't matter what the data is. We don't even look at the data. We don't have to synthesize anything, and we don't have to predict the future. We have a monetary policy that's set in stone that will not change. And you as an American citizen can now know and not just trust, but also verify that transparent monetary policy and plan your life so that your economic value you hold today will be worth a similar amount or more in the future. And like that changes the way that humans interact with each other in a society. And so ultimately, I think politicians start to say, wait a second, if my constituents are going to adopt this, if they're going to learn about this, it is going to change the way that not just I have to interact with them, it's also going to change the way they interact with each other. And if I can't speak their language, if I can't talk about this in a way that they understand, then I'm probably going to be out of a job. And that's the beauty of America is if we don't like you, we vote you out. And so let's see what happens.
Well, you brought up some statistics about adoption numbers. And when we talked earlier, I referenced this, but there was a study that we conducted back in March of likely Texas voters with a large N, a small margin of error, about 2% margin of error. And it showed that 29% of Texans own Bitcoin or other digital assets. 29% relative to the national average, which is slightly under 20%. So far and away above the national average. And it's skewed heavily to the under 65s. I think it was only 6% of over 65s own it. 52% of people under the age of 29. So if you can imagine that curve, the way that curve slopes. So as elected officials who are coming up through the ranks, the voters of tomorrow, it's going to be 80, 90% before we know it.
It goes a step further. I agree with all of that, but a Bitcoiner is going to be the president of the United States. Point blank, period, right? But it's not going to be because somebody is like doing memes on the internet and it's like, I'm going to go run for president, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is, if you look at 50% of people under the age of 29, well, we got a 1 in 2 shot at one of those people ends up becoming president, right? And so naturally what you're seeing is we have politicians that hold this on both the Congress, Senate, both sides of the aisle. We have people at the White House who aren't the president, but staff, et cetera, that hold these assets. And so it's just a matter of time before there ends up being people in positions of power and influence. We're talking about government, but it's true in corporations as well, The CEOs will be Bitcoiners. And it just takes time for that to happen. But I don't think necessarily it's so much about Bitcoin, the asset, as much as it is the way of thinking. And why I reference that is like, some of you in here run companies. Guess what? You're equity holders. But no one's running around and be like, oh shit, do you see that the new CEO holds equities? Like, no, right? Some of you hold gold and you run a company. No one's like, oh shit, we got a gold holder. No, it's the way that they think. And so I think that Bitcoin has this like set of ethos and has this long-term kind of viewpoint of the world that is going to start to permeate our society. The risk that we run is that we don't get those people in the positions of power and influence fast enough, because if we take too long, there's a lot of shit that's screwed up right now, and could be major issues and impairments that happen in the economy and in society until we get people in positions that can think long term. Because if I pulled this room right now and asked you, how many of you think politicians think long term? I bet you I don't get a single person raising their hand, because the incentives are off, right? They can't, you can't think 20 years in advance if literally you got to make sure you get reelected in 4 years, right? That's not the politician's fault. That's the way the system's set up. But if we understand that, no, what if we could get these people to think long term, whether they're in office or out of office, and as a collective society, we all started to think longer term, well, we probably would take on many more bold and ambitious challenges, and we'd start to do things that maybe right now we're either disincentivized from doing, or we don't really see a clear path to trying to tackle. And so I think that's really what is the powerful part about Bitcoin, is like the way that people think can change. And if we can change our collective thought, then that's pretty powerful.
So my next question could go one of two different ways. Recently you interviewed Matt Lostra of Giga Energy. Matt, I don't know if you're in the room, but if you are, raise your hand so we can see you. And then you've also interviewed some folks about Andrew Yang's ranked choice voting and some of the innovations. So democracy reform, ranked choice voting, that kind of thing. I'm sure he'll talk about that tomorrow when he's here. And then also, completely other side of the spectrum is flare gas mitigation, like jobs, local, like rural jobs. Which direction would you want to take? Like, which interview excited you more?
We could do both. Here's what I'll say about the flare gas mining, which first, if you get past rejecting the premise of ESG in general, it's just like a false narrative, which, yeah, it's bullshit. I mean, look, on the ESG stuff, like basically, I think we've seen it recently. There's some people who are very ESG friendly who just like in private conversation are now starting to say like, oh yeah, like that just like is a way for me to get attention. It's a way for me to be seen in a positive light from the media or the audience. But okay, let's just say we're going to hold our nose, or we're going to say the ESG premise is true, which I disagree with, but let's just say that. Okay, Bitcoiners are going to solve the climate crisis. Like everyone's like, wait, what? That goes completely counter to the narrative that we're seeing publicly. But if you actually take a look, there's like 4 or 5 things that most people in the ESG kind of environment will come to a conclusion and say these are the largest drivers of the climate crisis, right? And I'll put that kind of in quotes, whatever that's supposed to mean today. And one of them is cow farts, right? Like, again, it's not the driver, it's not the only driver, but that is one of them. Another is all the flare gas. And so if we can go ahead and we can tackle something like flare gas, and we can say to people, hey, there's now a financial incentive for you to turn what is a waste stream into a revenue stream, and we're able to do it in a profitable manner that is positive for the environment, but also drops dollars on your bottom line, you're gonna have a line out the door of every single one of these energy producers who says, I want to understand more about this. And right now, they're scared shitless. They don't want to talk about it. But like, I don't know if it's being recorded or not, but every single major oil and gas company in the world is doing this, and they won't talk about it. Why? Because they're scared that some ESG warrior is going to show up to their boardroom and be like, what do you mean you're getting in the Bitcoin game? The media told me Bitcoin's bad, it's bad for the environment. And what will happen is that it's going to take time for people who understand this technology, who understand mining, to rise up in the ranks, and eventually that ESG warrior is going to walk into a boardroom full of Bitcoiners, they're going to tell them to fuck off. Like, that's what's going to happen. And so, again, what is unique about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin doesn't have to play a net zero game, right? It's not like a zero-sum game. We can have people go and capture flare gas, turn it into Bitcoin in a profitable manner. We can do all these things that the ESG crowd likes, but we don't care if they're on board or not, right? And I think that's a really powerful part about Bitcoin, is that the miners are running around the world. There's a lot of miners in this room right now. They're running around the world looking for, where can I find low-cost energy? Flare gas is a great option, but also it incentivizes renewable energy. And so if you take the mainstream narrative, a bunch of you have heard that Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment. Well, I think that the American economy should put Bitcoin mining on a pedestal and should demand that every other industry meets the same standard that the Bitcoin mining industry has, which is that Bitcoin mining uses about 60% renewable energy in the energy mix. Why is it that the American economy uses less than 20%? We're 3 times higher penetration of renewables than the average American industry. They're behind. They're the problem. If we have 60%, why can't they? And that's a part of the conversation that no one really wants to have. It's because it's easy to yell and scream at the new thing. It's easy to yell and scream at the thing that is priding itself on being outside of the system. But when you look at the data, it is emphatically clear that the Bitcoin mining industry has done a much better job of embracing renewables than most other industries. And if we can just hammer that point home over and over and over again, I think that eventually the narrative will change, because from my perspective, we have truth on our side. This isn't a spin zone. It's not propaganda. It's just, here's the data. Why is it that we have 60% renewables and you don't? Don't lecture us. Fix your own shit. And I think that's ultimately what's going to end up happening.
Well, you said it. I all the time I'm talking to some of our progressive elected officials in Texas, or even like Elizabeth Warren. She sent that letter to the ERCOT CEO a few weeks ago, referenced the Texas Blockchain Council in a negative way, saying that we're promoting.
She doesn't like you?
She doesn't like us. We said, thank you. That's a badge of honor. No, but when we work with our Texas elected officials on the progressive side, who we do want to spend time on, we don't really have time for our Massachusetts friends in Massachusetts. We want to ensure that they see the facts. In fact, we're telling them, hey, we want you to come and look at the data. We want you to come out to one of these facilities, that one of these solar fields that was made possible by the economics of adding a load that's a buyer of first and last resort right next to it. This was going to be a 30 megawatt solar field. Now it's a 100 megawatt solar field because you added a Bitcoin mine. And it just changes the way those projects pencil out.
I always ask myself, the politicians who are, some of them are outright anti-Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, whatever. Some of them are, I'd put them in the cautiously pessimistic category of like, I think I shouldn't like this, but like I'm at least willing to hear you out. And then some people are like, I don't even know what this is, I'm too busy. But the people who are anti and the people who are cautiously pessimistic, is it because the system actually strips them of a lot of the bullshit that they're able to benefit from, right? If you think about it, if you're anti-Wall Street, if you're anti the financial system, what that you enjoy many times, not always, but many times, is the fact that there is no transparency. There is all of this bullshit going on. We all know it. They know it. The politicians know it. It's like an open secret in society. But it allows you to yell and scream about it. It allows you to campaign on it. It allows you to shake your fist at the big, institution that's never going to change. And you've been doing it for 20, 30 years from a political standpoint, and things haven't necessarily changed. And so if all of a sudden a solution comes along, is it that you want the solution, or is it the fact that you like to draw a line in the sand and have an enemy to yell at? And if it's that you actually want a solution, then those people will become believers in this technology because it's a fully transparent system, right? But what I worry about is that there's a lot of people who are anti the industry because actually getting a solution would be a problem. It would give them one less thing to hang their hat on. And if you have tied your identity, if you've tied your campaigning, if you've tied your entire service to the citizens on an issue, and that issue gets solved, well then why do we need you? We need somebody who can solve a different problem. And so it's very complicated. I think that it's very hard for us from the outside to kind of understand some of the dynamics here. But what I do know is that if you look around the country, there are people that every single person in this room could name that nobody knew. There's a guy, anybody heard the story about the mayor in Cool Valley, Missouri? I didn't even know fucking Cool Valley was a place, right? And then the guy said, I'm gonna give Bitcoin to all the citizens. And this guy went viral on the internet. And now there are millions of people around the world that know about Jason Stewart of Cool Valley, Missouri, right? All he did was say, I'm going to take Bitcoin and I'm going to give it to citizens. Anybody know where El Salvador is on a map now? A lot of y'all were going to lie, but you didn't know where El Salvador was 3 years ago, right? And so naturally what happens is these politicians, whether they have good intentions or not, are starting to learn that there is a competition going on for the infrastructure we've been talking about, for the individuals and their assets from a tax revenue standpoint, et cetera, but also for the hearts and minds. You have hundreds of millions of Bitcoiners around the world. There's estimates between 100 to 300 million. And they are looking for people to represent them, people to serve them that align with their view of the world. And so, of course, politicians are going to start being like, do I want to yell about the old system or do I want to get on board with the new one? And I just believe that optimists, the people who lean in, the people who embrace this stuff, are going to have a way better time than the people who fight it.
You know, we had a video played earlier of Mayor Matty Parker of Fort Worth, who took a courageous step and became the first city in the U.S. to mine Bitcoin. And I think that pilot, Steve could correct me on the numbers here, but it's made about $1,000. We gave them one S19. First, we gave them 3 S9s. They didn't work very well. We gave them one S19. That was better. But it netted about $1,000 after power costs. It's negligible for a city like Fort Worth. They got 700 million media impressions. Their goal was to get 7 million when they started this campaign. 700 million. And we've got Midland, who's coming right behind him. I know the wife of the mayor of Midland is here in the audience today. And Midland, for those of us from Texas, is like the energy. Well, Houston is kind of vying. Houston's like the downstream. Yeah, Houston's the downstream. Midland is sort of upstream. Independent, the plebs of the energy
I watch
world.
Friday Night Lights. I know about
Midland. Okay, all right. So you've got these cities in Texas that are popping up. Then, of course, they're popping up all over the country. But these mayors, they actually have quite a bit of influence in their municipal area. So I think there's so much focus on DC. What would you say to the idea that we can actually make a lot more progress at the municipal level, at the city level?
Don't get mad at me for this. There's somebody from the governor's office in here right now. If you guys think that Texas should embrace Bitcoin, just start clapping, right? And the reason why you should do that every single time you see a politician, someone from the governor's office, somebody from a city or whatever, is because ultimately they will listen. You are their boss. You will vote them out, right? At the end of the day, that's it. They want to represent you. And so when you see these people, talk to them about it, right? When I met the gentleman who works at the governor's office, you know what I said to him? Why have you guys not bought Bitcoin and put it on the state balance sheet yet?
We're working on it.
I don't know. I talked to him for 30 seconds. That was my first question. Why? Because that's the conversation. It's nice to meet you. I don't got time to chit chat. Why have you not done it yet? What can we do to help? What information do you need? How can we educate you? Who do you need to talk to? Right? But what's going to happen inside these organizations, we were talking about it earlier today, every single organization that embraces Bitcoin is because one person stood up and said, this is important to me. And they went to a colleague, they went to their boss, they went to somebody who works for them, they went to somebody who was on the board, somebody who invested, and said, hey, this is important to me. That one person turned into 2, which turned into 4, which turned into 8, which eventually got to a decision maker, which eventually got something done. But every single one of you is part of an organization, you're part of a community, you're part of other types of groups of people. If you don't speak up, who will? And that's ultimately how this has happened. That's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that it literally started. Somebody published a white paper on the internet and emailed friends. And now all of us are fools sitting in this room talking about it 15 years later. That is the beauty of this, is that individuals adopted it first. It wasn't the military, it wasn't nation states creating technology and pushing it down through the corporations to the people. It was from the people first. And so you have to remember, it's this big thing. It's got this global brand. It's got, hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap. They're talking about it on financial news. Like all these things that we're looking at, we're like, we're winning. But it doesn't stop. You have to continue to talk about it every chance you get to the people that matter. You have to educate your family, your friends, but you also have to go to work and be that person. Be the person that no one ever hears your name, but when you go to sleep at night, I help this organization embrace this. I help this city do this. Because what ends up happening is you are going to end up transferring the long-term thinking that you have to that organization, and it'll end up serving thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people literally for years to come. And you don't need any recognition for it, but it's not going to get done unless you do it. And so every time I talk to these politicians and stuff, they like laugh, right? But I'm like, no, like that's what I want to talk about, right? I'll tell another quick story. When I met Mayor Suarez in Florida, I never said this publicly before, so I hope he didn't get mad at me. But I went to Miami, and he was like, hey, let's meet. I was like, who, okay. Went to his office, and he was like, what should I do? And I was like, I don't know anything about being a mayor. What do you mean, what should you do? He goes, no, with Bitcoin. Offhand comment. I was like, oh, you should pay the employees in Bitcoin. You should buy Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and you should let citizens pay in tax, their taxes in Bitcoin. By the way, I don't know if anyone's going to do it or not, but like get the ball rolling. The next day, he was on national television saying that's what he was going to do. I had no clue he was going to do that, right? And then guess what? He said it publicly. Once he said it publicly, then a bunch of other people started, and then a bunch of other people. And then next thing you know, he's in front of the city council. He's literally talking about, hey, here's the plan to do it. Here's who the service providers are that we're going to do whatever. And so when you see that, it's like, okay, who else can you tell? And I think what you're surprised by is the people that end up hearing about this. Like Texas is a hotbed for it. 50% of people under the age of 29. You know why? Because you guys care about property rights. You don't trust other people. Right? Like this place was built for Bitcoin. And so all you got to do is explain it. And next thing you know, people are like, damn, I've been looking for this my whole life.
I mean, I think that would resonate too with some of those generations of Texans that are a little bit more old school, right? Like people like my dad who grew up in like level land in La Mesa on a farm. And 7 decades later, he's here helping me volunteer here at the summit. Right, that there's just something for those longtime Texans that have just experienced a lot of these inconsistencies. Where when you talk about property rights, when you talk about those connections, it's not often that those are in the context of the digital world. This is the first time that those two bridges have been linked.
Yeah, it's trying to take. I always think about like on the investment side. So if you look at it from the financial lens. Taking timeless investing principles and codifying it in this new digital world, right? So if you think of, go interview a Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, what would they say? Buy great assets, hold them forever. Dollar cost average, don't trade, don't use leverage, like all these things, right? Okay, guess what Bitcoiners say? HODL. Warren doesn't know how to spell HODL, but he's been saying HODL his entire fucking life, right? And so it's like, Bitcoin aligns with the timeless investing principles. Then if you take a look at it through the political lens, go read the US Constitution or the Bill of Rights and look at what Bitcoin is doing. It's the exact same thing. It's delivering property rights, individual rights, personal liberties, etc., back to the citizens. Okay. Then if you take a look at it through what I just call like personal ethos, right? How many people in this room own a gun? Okay, I'm assuming you guys don't own guns because you just want to show your friends, right? And so naturally what ends up happening is there's a defense aspect. There's a lot of people who think personal defense is important. Bitcoin is personal defense for your bank account. And so you start just overlaying this asset on top of all of these different elements of your life, and you realize this is the digital kind of like coming out party for all of these ethos, all these ideas that people already subscribe to. It's just that if you go and you just Google Bitcoin, the thing that you're going to find is like a chart that makes it look like you got to become a trader to understand it, right? But if you describe it to people in ways that they already are sympathetic to, it's so obvious to them. And that's how you get, I don't know very much about Texas, so if I misspeak here, don't get mad at me, but the sixth generation Texas rancher who's like, I have cattle, I have land, and I have Bitcoin. It's because they already understand Bitcoin. They just don't realize what it is until somebody tells them, right? And that's what's so exciting to me about it.
So earlier we were talking about it's difficult. You can't just have a board meeting for Bitcoin, right? It's decentralized. There's no central authorities is what makes it amazing. But it also creates challenges for people like Sam Bankman-Fried, right? The community had no control over his ascension and rise.
Bitcoin and Sam didn't have board meetings.
How do we ensure that the highest character people are the ones representing us in the halls of power? Because I think that's been a problem.
I don't think we have to worry about it, which may be a little bit counterintuitive. The free market is a hell of a fucking referee, right? And if you watch what just happened, this industry is who held the industry accountable. It was somebody at CoinDesk who broke that story. CZ is the one who used free market forces to take that company down. It was a regulated business. A lot of people say it's offshore, unregulated, whatever. They subscribe to the regulations of the jurisdiction they're within. They have a US-based entity that was regulated. There's auditors, there's all these things. None of that caught it. It ended up being an element of self-policing. Now, it got big, $10 billion, all this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, the judge, jury, and executioner was the free market and the industry itself. And so I just tend to say you could waste your time running around trying to moralize kind of Bitcoin. You can run around and try to say you're a good person, you're a bad person, whatever. I've been doing this long enough now that good people, they survive, and the bad people, they end up getting washed out. And so I tend to think that more than in any place that I've ever seen in the technology or finance sector, Bitcoin is the freest market we have. And it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter who you are, who you know, any of that stuff. You're going to get run over by the train if you don't get on board. And so I think that we've seen that in bull and bear cycles in the past. I think that in Washington, D.C., you're seeing that in the regulatory front. And I think that you're also seeing it in what I'll just call like the halls of the internet, where you see a lot of people who may do kind of crazy things or whatever. And what's always shocked me is like there's like open secrets, right? And if you stay on like the Sam theme for a second, like there was literally a whole bunch of assets that were called Sam coins. Like they weren't saying that for like that was like open secret. And so I just think that like the free market is just a hell of a referee, and that's a good thing. Like we should embrace that. We if we wanted a system, we should want the free market system, in my opinion. And it may have taken longer than we wanted. It may have allowed things to get bigger than we wanted, but ultimately, it did its job.
Another great free market is the ERCOT market, the energy-only market, right? So unlike anywhere in the world, the price of energy in Texas is it's floating, and the principles of supply and demand are permitted to take their due course. So you have these kinds of self-correcting things where a Bitcoin miner, which is securing another beautiful free market, can then turn to the ERCOT energy-only marketplace and with great precision and price sensitivity understand when that price curve starts to move up and they hit their break-even point, they turn off. Mm-hmm. So you have two functioning free markets that are kind of in a marriage there in the Bitcoin mining industry. We talked about Bitcoin mining a little bit earlier, but I do want to also ask you a question about job creation education. Mm-hmm. You're a big proponent of education in the space. We need a lot of education on the custody side, but we also need education in the racking and stacking, ASIC repair, that kind of thing. What is your portfolio companies? What's your favorite portfolio company as far as education is concerned?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite. I think I can talk about it from the perspective of things that we've done. So we started a company 2 years ago, and the idea of it first was just get people jobs. It blew my mind. I'd done at the time, I don't know, a couple hundred interviews with people, and I would always ask the executives of the companies, kind of offhand comment at the end, just like, hey, let me know if I can do anything to help. Time and again, they were like, just send me great people, talent. And I was like, that's crazy. My email and DMs are full of people who are coming from legacy tech and finance. I want to work in this industry. How is it that there's dislocation here? Yeah. And so we ended up building a product to help solve that. About 2,000 people or so have gotten a job in the last 18 months through that. So kind of 2, 3, 4 people a day. And so it works. Wow. But then what became very interesting is then some of the biggest companies in the industry started to call me and say, hey, you're sending us all these candidates. There's interest. Half the people understand the industry, half of them don't. So they're good at sales or marketing or customer service or operations or whatever they do, but you still need to understand the technology, right? It's like trying to go, and I don't know, if you wanted to go and work in an industrial sector and you didn't understand industrials, but you're like, yeah, but I'm good at marketing. Maybe you could get the job done, right? Same thing here. And so we started training people. Now we've trained thousands of people and done that. And what you find is that in that like education / employment sector, I see the numbers. This is one of the fastest growing sectors in America. And so what that means is that you are going to see more and more people coming because there's economic opportunity. You are going to see more and more companies being created because ultimately there's going to end up being a surplus of people available that want to work on this stuff. And then the third thing is that you're going to see a bunch of infrastructure built to how do we educate these people, right? We still in America do not teach personal finance in high school, which is fucking crazy to me, right? But we have high schools now that are trying to teach about blockchain technology. Think about that. Imagine if you send your kid to a high school, they don't teach how to balance a checkbook, how to do budgeting, what a credit card's for, any of that stuff. But they now want to do things on like blockchain technology. And again, do they always get it right? No. Are they focused on the wrong parts of the industry? Sure, whatever. But what you find is that they're doing that because the students are interested.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I didn't give a shit about a checkbook, right? I was trying to do all kinds of other crazy stuff. But what you find now is these kids, they have supercomputers in their hands from a very young age. They see what people are talking about. They're seeing their friends go and play with these things and use the technologies, all that stuff. And so schools are going to have to do it or they're going to get left behind. There was, I don't know the gentleman's name from SMU who runs the blockchain club. Every single college in America now, for the most part, is either in the process of starting one or has already started one.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, that long term, that gives me a lot of hope because we're going to be educating people. In the short term is what we need to solve. And I think your point about like, everyone doesn't need to go be a software developer. Like, we need someone to go fix the ASICs, right? Keep the network running. We need people who understand how self-custody works. We need people who can go and help on the regulation front or whatever. And that's part of the beauty of this industry is that like, we took a public defender, right? Like literally somebody who is paid by the state to defend people who've been accused of crimes. And we were able in 3 or 4 weeks to get him a job in the industry by training.